Oh, one girl told me, come on over. There's nobody home. I went over. There was nobody home. And this girl was no bargain either. She was fat. Ooh.
Fat, huh?
When she wears high heels, she strikes oil, okay? She's fat. Well, I met her at the Macy's parade. She was wearing ropes. When she was on the Richard Simmons show jumping up and down, my TV fell off the stand. But I'm talking about a fat girl here, you know what I mean? Big girl. You're kidding? She was standing alone. A cop told her to break it up, you know. Fat and ugly. Ooh, is she ugly?
Ugly.
How ugly? I took her to the beach. They asked me what I used for bait. When I took her home, my mother put newspapers on the floor. I mean, ugly. I gave her a hickey. I got fur in my mouth. And that's how ugly she was.
Good morning. It's Monday, Medal of Honor Monday, February the 26th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have the patriotic shorts, motivation, Bishop Barron, Ayn Rand, the 33 strategies of war, and the Medal of Honor. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. Now a little bit of combat radio chatter.
We are located just south of the control tower with multiple vehicles marked by IR strobes. Such 2-1 is visual your position. Roger. I'd like you to push north and attempt to get your pod on that same area. Again, that's 15 kilometers northwest of the airfield. State Angels 1A and above. Such copies. Push. Dragon 1-5, you have Suts 2-1, flight of 2 F-18s at Angels 1-8 and above, pushing east of you to get eyes on with their lightning pod.
Dragon copies. We're seeing some vehicles on the road. Appears to be armor. We're engaging.
Twisting copies. Can you confirm that it is armor?
Stand by.
Suds, twisting. Let me know when you capture that area.
Twisted, Suts 2-1, we are captured.
Roger. Can you confirm presence of armor?
Stand by. Negative. We're not seeing anything. Can Dragon pass a grid?
Dragon 1-5, twisting. Did you copy? Understand you have contact with enemy armor. Can you pass a grid when able?
Roger. We're engaging in the vicinity of 3384 grid square.
Dragon, Suts copies. Dragon 1-5, Suts 2-1, we're not seeing what you're seeing in our pod. We're seeing your impacts, but no vehicles. Can you call corrections off your impacts?
Stand by.
Brown Horse, this is White Horse. Stand by for salute report 2-1. Over.
White Horse is Brown Horse. Stand by to copy.
Line Sierra, 2-0 personnel. Line Alpha, patrolling what appears to be at headquarters. Break. Line Lima, 3-8 Sierra, Papa Victor, 3-2-4, 4-2-9er. Line uniform, Republican Guard. Break. Line Tango, 2-3 March, 2-0-0 tree. 1-7-3-0 Zulu. Line Echo, AK-47s and RPKs. How copy so far? Over.
Yeah, say again, line Lima, over.
Roger. I say again, line Lima, 3-8 Sierra, Papa Victor, 3-2-4, 4-2-9er. How copy?
Solid copy. Do you have any remarks? Over.
A firm. Remarks. All personnel appear to be on guard. Very weak posture. Over.
Roger, solid copy on all. Brown Horse out. Godfather, this is Raptor. Stand by for salute report. Over.
Raptor, this is Godfather. Send your traffic. Over.
Roger. Line Sierra. 4 enemy personnel. Break. Line Alpha. Holding what appears to be LPOP's vicinity. MSR south of Alcoot. Break. Line Lima. Papa Victor. 5-4-9er. Tree. 9er 4. How copy so far? Over.
Solid copy so far. Over.
Roger. Line uniform. Unknown at this time. Line Tango. Tree. April. 1700 Zulu. 2003. Break. Line Echo. 4 AK-47s. Web gear. 6 AK mags per. Over.
Solid copy. Break. Do you have any remarks? Over.
A-firm. Stand by to copy. Remarks. Over.
Roger. Standing by to copy.
Remarks as follows. All 4 personnel were found posted along northern running MSR. Appeared to be LPOP. 2 personnel had red and green pop-up flares. No communications or night vision were found. Over.
Roger. Godfather copies. Break. Bring EPWs to be processed at the CP after field interrogation. Godfather out.
And that was the combat radio chatter. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the patriotic shorts.
I knew that I couldn't get my tourniquet on. I knew I was losing a lot of blood. I knew I was dying. We're trained in battlefield trauma, and I knew enough that I was going into hypovolemic shock from the loss of blood. I was getting cold in my extremities. I was losing feeling and the ability to move in the extremities because my body was trying to pull stuff into my core. to keep me alive. It just got harder and harder to breathe. It got harder and harder to think. Every breath, I felt like you're going to die here. I said a prayer, and a thought popped into my head. I had seen a show, Baghdad ER. And on that show, they talked about that if our wounded warriors showed up in the combat support hospital with a pulse, the military trauma professionals had a 90% chance of saving them. And that became my focus and my goal. Stay awake to stay alive, stay awake to stay alive. And that was just kind of my mantra right up to the point that, they wheeled me in and the bright lights of the OR came on.
Clinging to that spot, it's like getting to Wednesday morning sunrise, only this time they were right.
They were right, yeah, thank God.
On March 17, 2012, Iranian Su-25 planes chased an MQ-1 drone that was flying just 16 miles from Iran. Being close air support jets, Su-25s failed to shoot the drone down. Another MQ-1 chase occurred in 2013, but this time, Iran used air-to-air capable F-4 Phantom II jets. Nowadays, planning is going on to deploy future jets with drones, but in 2013, fifth-generation jets were deployed to escort a drone. Yes, the MQ-1 had two F-22 Raptors as its bodyguards. Iranian F-4 pilots didn't know about this high-value air asset escort, and they began to position themselves for a missile launch. One F-22 Raptor got close to one of the F-4s and sneaked beneath it from behind. The pilot checked what missiles it was carrying, and then the pilot appeared from their left and said, "You really ought to go home." Futuristic stealth helped the F-22 remain stealthy.
We had two guys in our company that we call Mutt and Jeff because one of them was tall and the other one, they were inseparable. You never saw one that you didn't see the other. They were good friends. They both were shot. Didn't have a chance of getting out of there. So we finally discussed it and we were talking about it. We got to this guy and we asked him, "Is this guy alive? If he's alive, we're going to try to get him out." He said, "He's so near dead, you don't need to bother." And that was true of both of them. And they were 25 feet apart, those two guys. When we went back and took that and get those wounded out, that one guy had crawled that 25 yards over to his buddy and laid his head on the guy's chest, and we found them both dead there.
As droplets of misty spray speckled his face, he snapped back to reality. He was about to disembark from his landing craft in the pre-dawn hours of June 6, 1944. His name was Charles Durning, and though he would go on to enjoy a prolific acting career, he would be the only man in his unit to make it onto Omaha Beach that morning. While taking out 7 German machine gunners, Durning was shot in both legs and ravaged with shrapnel, barely surviving. He would spend the next 6 months in a London hospital relearning to walk before breaking out and rejoining his unit in Belgium. It was there that he was part of a group that was captured and forced to march through the Malmedy forest when German soldiers opened fire on the unsuspecting POWs. Durning was one of a handful of the 90 Americans to escape what would be known as the Malmedy Massacre. "I saw things that nobody should ever have to see," said Durning shortly before passing away at the age of 89. "I'll take the memory of those boys who didn't make it to the grave with me."
Imagine you're working inside the bomb bay of the B-1B Lancer, and all of a sudden the massive, thick metal doors clamp down on you. That happened once to a young airman, changing his life in an instant. The young airman was standing on a ladder checking over the weapons systems while his supervisor was inside the aircraft, calling down to him whenever he was going to close the doors. At one point, however, the supervisor forgot to warn him and closed the doors while the airman was still inside the bomb bay. A horrifying thud was followed by the sound of the ladder clattering against the floor. When the supervisor rushed down to see what had happened, the airman's legs were dangling from between the giant black doors with his top half stuck inside. Immediately, the supervisor reopened the doors and the airman's body dropped, slamming against the hard concrete floor. Though he survived, he was in critical condition, but it could have been worse. After all, only the door's rubber edges prevented him from being chopped in half.
Why does the B-52 produce so much smoke? Let me explain. The Boeing B-52 Stratofortress has been a staple of the United States Air Force for over 6 decades, serving as one of the most recognizable military aircraft. It has played a significant role in modern warfare. However, one distinctive feature of the B-52 is the thick black smoke emitted by its engines. The B-52 is powered by 8 Pratt & Whitney TF-33 engines. These engines are turbofan engines that utilize older technology compared to more modern engines. One of the reasons why the B-52 produces a significant amount of smoke is because these engines burn a high volume of fuel, which can result in incomplete combustion. Additionally, the design of the engines and the age of the aircraft contribute to the smoke output. The TF-33 engines were developed in the 1950s and are known for their robustness and reliability, but they are less fuel efficient and environmentally friendly compared to newer engine designs.
So we're sitting at the end of the runway, with brakes on. I said, okay, Al, go ahead. When you release brakes, I'll press my stopwatch and we'll time how long it's going to take to get up to 24,000 feet. So he said, okay. It says, I'm releasing brakes now. And boy, I was thrown back in my seat. He went to full afterburner and we hit the S1 and S2 speed and he started to climb. And we were much going right straight up. At 15,000 feet, he could see the end of the runway below him. And Carl says, I'm passing through 15,000 feet. And they wouldn't believe him. They said, sir, do you mean 1,500 feet? He says, no, make that 19,000 feet now, and we're getting ready to level off. He says, okay, George, I'm leveling off now. What was our time? I looked at my stopwatch. It was 48 seconds from brake release, 24,000 feet. He went up like a rocket.
He was the only enlisted Marine to be awarded both the Medal of Honor and the Navy Cross for heroism in combat. His name was John Basilone, and he was a Marine Corps gunnery sergeant who fought valiantly at both Guadalcanal and Iwo Jima, two of the bloodiest battles of World War II. During the battle for Henderson Field, with supply lines having been cut off, Basilone almost single-handedly held off a Japanese onslaught for 3 days, at one point with nothing more than a pistol and machete. It earned him the Medal of Honor, and he was sent stateside on a war bond campaign. But Basilone asked to be sent back to the Pacific, where he was on the initial landing at Iwo Jima in February 1945. It was there that he destroyed a Japanese garrison and aided a Marine tank trapped and under fire before he was killed by shrapnel from an exploding shell. John Basilone was posthumously awarded the Navy Cross for his extraordinary heroism at Iwo Jima, and he is buried in Arlington National Cemetery.
This is the plane that uses sound to kill. Its only weapon is a sonic boom. Let me explain. In the 1960s, the Soviet Union set out on a mission to construct an aircraft called the M-25 Hell Reaper, an aircraft designed to use the power of its sonic boom as a deadly weapon, without the need for traditional munitions. This jet would be like nothing ever made before. It was set to be powered by 4 jet engines, with the bottom of the aircraft having a deployable ledge. When activated, this ledge unleashed a unique shockwave capable of decimating structures, obliterating tanks, and ending lives. If everything went to plan, the aircraft would reach Mach 1.4 and fly as low to the ground as possible to create destruction. But here's the problem. The engines needed for the aircraft didn't exist. They were yet to be made by any military. The jet was so advanced that it came with budget and technological challenges, and luckily the vision was so expensive that it never made it past the drawing board. Do you think it was a good idea?
It may be of interest to you to know that modern submarines are not painted at all. Instead, all the present-day submarines are covered with anechoic tiles which improve their stealth characteristics. Anechoic tiles are rubber or synthetic polymer tiles containing thousands of tiny holes applied to the outer hulls of military ships and submarines. The function is to absorb the sound waves of active sonar used by the enemy and to attenuate the sounds emitted from inside the submarine to avoid detection. It began in World War I when the U.S. Navy found that their submarines were easily spotted by enemy aircraft when they surfaced for refueling. So by the time World War II began, they had repainted the decks of most of their subs dark blue instead of black, as this color offered the best camouflage in shallow waters. However, they found out that the blue paint deteriorated and the color faded fast, so now the original black color is chosen for its durability.
And that was the Patriotic Shorts. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now a little motivation.
Every single person who wants to do something with their life and has done something with their life has gone through the exact chapter that you're going through. And it's the lonely chapter. It's the chapter where you don't fit in with your own friends, but you don't have the outcomes yet to fit into a new group of friends. And you're going through this and you're like, is this even worth it? Because you have no signs of success, right? But if there's anything that you can take away from what we're saying right now, is that the sign of success is the hate that you get along the way.
It's time to stay focused. It's time to decide clubs, partying, trying to fit in and socialize. Why are you so antisocial? Because I'm trying to get it. Why are you staying on the basketball court so much? Because I'm trying to get it. The more weird you are is a reflection of how committed you are to focusing on your molding and shaping and developing your ideas and your craft so that when it's time for you to make your rounds, you're going to fly.
Success. What does it mean? Loneliness. Culpability. Failure. Reflection. Regret. Sadness. Emptiness. But it's not only that. It is also hope. Determination. Improvement. Progress. Learning. Resilience. Discipline. Remember that failures are only part of the story, but they are necessary to achieve success.
I think people gain a tremendous amount of wisdom when they travel, when they wander, when they allow themselves, as I did, to get lost. And maybe you'll find yourself somewhere. I think we look down now to 16-year-olds and say, where are you going to go to college? What are you going to do for the rest of your life? And it's like, they're not fully baked yet. How do they know? Give them a break. Take a year off. Take 2 years off. Join the Peace Corps. Travel. Go figure things out. Or just enjoy yourself. For the first time in their lives, they're adults, and they don't have to be somewhere. They're not told to be somewhere. Get used to that freedom. Get used to having the need to self-govern yourself. To be able to employ self-discipline.
Champions are broken. It's like people look at champions and try and find something that champion has that they don't have, but it's not that at all. He's like, they lack something everyone else has, which is an off button. They just don't stop. And if we're optimizing for outcomes, then the most broken person will win. The person who has the absolute biggest, desire for achievement, the absolute biggest fear or pain that they're running away from, and the hardest impulse control. Now, impulse control, most people would agree, is a good thing. The other two, not as much. And so, what are we optimizing for? What problem are we solving? If the problem that we're solving is that I want to be content, well, there's a lot of ways to do that. You don't need to do all these other things. If the problem you're solving is that you want to be the richest man in the world, well, you're going to have a lot of superiority complex, you're going to have a lot of crippling insecurity, and you're going to have a lot of impulse control, and you're going to have to wait a long time.
We're the lucky ones. We're the ones who get to die because you only get to die for having lived. Most people who could ever exist will never even be born. So no matter what your lot is in life, if you have a disease or you have cancer, you're crippled, whatever is the thing, at the end of the day, you're alive, not dead, nor not having ever been born. So take every occasion you can to smell the flowers, to drink in the sunsets and the sunrise and the majestic sky above you that they cradle through the nighttime hours, and celebrate life because you won the lottery.
It's time to stop playing the victim and start owning your life. No more excuses, no more blame games. You're in control. Embrace the pain, face the uncomfortable truths, and take full responsibility. So, get off your ass, stop making excuses, and start taking full responsibility for your life. It won't be easy, and it sure as hell won't be comfortable. But greatness never comes from comfort. Embrace the suck, embrace the challenge, and watch yourself transform into a force to be reckoned with. Life's a battle. It's not easy.
and it sure as hell doesn't care about your feelings. But guess what? You signed up for this fight the moment you took your first breath. So stop whining, stop making excuses, and start owning your shit. No more settling for less. Rise up, stay hard, and own your destiny.
I feel to be at the pinnacle of any game. Whatever you do, you've got to be a little bit gone to it. You're not all there. You've got to be almost insane to your craft. Not a lot of people can understand that. That's why I don't know about nothing else. I do not pay attention to nothing else.
You will never understand what is wrong with me. And that's why I'm so fucking glad you don't. Because I'm in the right fucking spot. When people don't understand you anymore, you're in that spot of obsession and drive. Where people are like, what the fuck is wrong with this guy? I don't want to talk to you, man, because you're not going to get it.
Embrace the battle within. There's a war you must wage, a battle that transcends external conflicts, the war against yourself. Staring into the mirror, ready to transform your life, is no easy feat. It demands accountability, a willingness to learn, and the courage to endure discomfort. Change is hard, let's not sugarcoat it. Yet it's within the crucible of challenge that we forge our strength. Avoiding discomfort is a shortcut to perpetual weakness. Success isn't a leisurely stroll, it's a challenging expedition. To embark on this journey, you must acquaint yourself with discomfort, for therein lies the crucible of growth.
Your perception, your mindset, your ability to decide how you feel about outside factors in life is pretty much going to decide whether or not you're going to have good days or bad days. You know, if you start anything with a negative mentality, with a negative attitude, then you're just going to find shit to be upset about. I think what I'm really trying to say is you could go into the exact same situation, or you could do 2 days where you do the exact same things. You have the exact same workout, the same day schedule. You have to deal with the same shit, do the same stuff, you know, whatever. But if you can somehow rewire your brain to be a little bit happier about it, right? Be a little bit more jovial instead of a hard ass complaining all the time, then you're going to have more fun, man. You're going to enjoy it.
What about looking back over history? You've written the idea that women were oppressed throughout history is an appalling theory. They haven't had a great time, though, have they?
Who has had a great time in history? How about war?
But it took longer for women to get the vote, and women belonged to their husbands.
History is a rough business. Most of the time, men and women helped each other. Like, women raised their sons, you know? Husbands protected their families. I'm not buying this whole, the sexes have been at each other's throats the entire history of mankind. And then one level deeper than that, I don't like the whole game. The whole game is, let's divide people into groups and contrast their oppression. We did that in the 20th century, right? The right-wingers played it in Nazi Germany, and left-wingers played it throughout the communist world. And all that happened was that we stacked up the corpses, millions of them. It's not a good game. The equity game, that's a bad game.
Bad game?
Bad game.
You don't want to read this just to be sure?
If it says equity, it's a bad game. Because it means equality of outcome.
Right.
Here, we'll do a little bit of writ.
And that was a little bit of motivation. Thank you. And now the daily laws for February 25th and 26th.
February 25th. Keep expanding your horizons. The reality of the apprenticeship phase is no one is really going to help you or give you direction. In fact, the odds are against you. If you desire an apprenticeship, if you want to learn and set yourself up for mastery, you have to do it yourself and with great energy. When you enter this phase, you generally begin at the lowest position. Your access to knowledge and people is limited by your status. If you are not careful, you will accept this status and become defined by it, particularly if you come from a disadvantaged background. Instead, you must struggle against any limitations and continually work to expand your horizons. In each learning situation, you will submit to reality, but that reality does not mean you must stay in one place. Reading books and materials that go beyond what is required is always a good starting point. Being exposed to ideas in the wide world, you will tend to develop a hunger for more and more knowledge. You will find it harder to remain satisfied in any narrow corner, which is precisely the point. The people in your field, in your immediate circle, are like worlds unto themselves. Their stories and viewpoints will naturally expand your horizons and build up your social skills. Mingle with as many different types of people as possible. Those circles will slowly widen. Any kind of outside schooling will add to the dynamic. Daily law. Be relentless in your pursuit for expansion. Whenever you feel like you are settling into some circle, force yourself to shake things up and look for new challenges. Mastery Chapter 2. Submit to reality. The ideal apprenticeship. February 26th. Venture outside your comfort zone. Our vanity, our passions, our spirit of imitation, our abstract intelligence, our habits have long been at work, and it is the task of art to undo this work of theirs, making us travel back in the direction from which we have come, to the depths where what has really existed lies unknown within us. Marcel Proust. As Leonardo da Vinci progressed in his studio work for Verrocchio, he began to experiment and to assert his own style. He found to his surprise that the master was impressed with his inventiveness. For Leonardo, this indicated that he was near the end of his apprenticeship. Most people wait too long to take this step, generally out of fear. It is always easier to learn the rules and stay within your comfort zone. Often you must force yourself to initiate such actions or experiments before you think you are ready. You are testing your character, moving past your fears, and developing a sense of detachment to your work, looking at it through the eyes of others. You are getting a taste for the next phase in which what you produce will be under constant scrutiny. Daily law. Try the thing you don't think you're quite ready for. Mastery Chapter 2. Submit to reality. The ideal apprenticeship.
And that was the Daily Laws for February 25th and 26th from The Daily Laws by Robert Greene. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Bishop Robert Barron.
If we're just talking to God in an undifferentiated way, then we're not praying in a manner different than the way a Jew or a Muslim or a general monotheist would pray. What's the Christian difference? The Christian difference is that the one God who's displayed himself now as Father, Son, and Spirit, we pray to the Father as though the Son has his arm around our shoulder, because the Father sent the Son into our own humanity, into our sin and death. So the Son's gone all the way out. So the Son now helps us to pray to the Father. Now, where's the Holy Spirit come in? The Holy Spirit is the love that connects the Father and the Son. In fact, now in this prayer, the Son's arm around my shoulder, directed to the Father, is a prayer in the Holy Spirit. I've been drawn into the dynamics of the love between the Father and the Son. God has opened up the Trinitarian life and now includes us in it.
And that was Bishop Robert Barron. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Quote, if you want me to name in one sentence what is wrong with the modern world, I will say that never before has the world been clamoring so desperately for answers to crucial problems, and never before has the world been so frantically committed to the belief that no answers are possible. Unquote. And that was the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now we'll pick up where we left off with the 33 strategies of war.
They simply look at the same problem from a different angle. Freed from the stranglehold of convention, the superior general naturally hits on the right strategy. The Romans were dazzled by Hannibal's strategic genius. They came to so fear him that the only strategies they could use against him were delay and avoidance. Scipio Africanus simply saw differently. At every turn he looked not at the enemy army, nor even at its leader, but at the pillar of support on which it stood, its critical vulnerability. He understood that military power was located not in the army itself, but in its foundations, the things that supported it and made it possible. Money, supplies, public goodwill, allies. He found those pillars, and bit by bit knocked them down. Scipio's first step was to see Spain, not Italy, as Hannibal's center of gravity. Within Spain, the key was New Carthage. He did not chase the various Roman armies, but took New Carthage and turned the war around. Now Hannibal, deprived of his main military base and source of supply, would have to lean more heavily on his other support base, Carthage itself, with its wealth and resources. So Scipio took the war to Africa. Trapped near Utica, he examined what gave the enemy its power in this situation and saw that it was not the armies themselves, but the position they had taken. Get them to move out of that position without wasting men in a frontal battle, and Carthage's soft underbelly would be exposed. By burning the camps, Scipio moved the armies. Then, instead of marching on the city of Carthage, a glittering prize that would have drawn most generals like a magnet, he hit what would hurt the Carthaginian state most, the fertile farming zone that was the source of its wealth. Finally, instead of chasing Hannibal, he made Hannibal come after him, to an area in the middle of the country where he would be deprived of reinforcements and support. Now that Scipio had unbalanced the Carthaginians so completely, their defeat at Zama was definitive. Power is deceptive. If we imagine the enemy as a boxer, we tend to focus on his punch. But still more than he depends on his punch, he depends on his legs. Once they go weak, he loses balance. He cannot escape the other fighter. He is subject to grueling exchanges, and his punches gradually diminish in force until he is knocked out. When you look at your rivals, do not be distracted by their punch. To engage in any exchange of punches, in life or in war, is the height of stupidity and waste. Power depends on balance and support. So look at what is holding your enemy up, and remember that what holds him up can also make him fall. A person, like an army, usually gets his or her power from 3 or 4 simultaneous sources: money, popularity, skillful maneuvering, some particular advantage he has fostered. Knock out one, and he will have to depend more on the others. Knock out those, and he is lost. Weaken a boxer's legs, and he will reel and stagger. And when he does, be merciless. No power can stand without its legs. By Ming Dynasty strategist Jia Xuan. When the veins are removed from an arrow, even though the shaft and tip remain, it is difficult for the arrow to penetrate deeply. Keys to warfare. It is natural in war to focus on the physical aspect of conflict: bodies, equipment, materiel. Even an enlightened strategist will tend to look first at the enemy's army, firepower, mobility, reserves. War is a visceral, emotional affair, an arena of physical danger, and it takes great effort to rise above this level and ask different questions. What makes the enemy army move? What gives it impetus and endurance? Who guides its actions? What is the underlying source of its strength? Most people have the problem of seeing war as a separate activity, unrelated to other realms of human life. But in fact, war is a form of power. Karl von Clausewitz called it politics by other means. And all forms of power share the same essential structures. The most visible thing about power is its outward manifestation, what its witnesses see and feel. An army has its size, its weaponry, its shows of discipline, its aggressive maneuvers. Individuals have many ways of showing their position and influence. It is the nature of power to present a forceful front, to seem menacing and intimidating, strong and decisive. But this outward display is often exaggerated or even downright deceptive, since power does not dare show its weaknesses. And beneath the display is the support on which power rests, its center of gravity. The phrase is von Clausewitz, who elaborated it as the hub of all power and movement on which everything depends. This is the part that governs the whole, a kind of nerve center. To attack this center of gravity, to neutralize or destroy it, is the ultimate strategy in war, for without it the whole structure will collapse. The enemy may have great generals and strong armies, like Hannibal and his invincible army in Italy, but without a center of gravity those armies cannot move and have no force or coherence. Hitting the center will have devastating psychological effects, throwing the enemy off balance and inducing a creeping panic. If conventional generals look at the physical aspect of the enemy army, focusing on its weaknesses and trying to exploit them, superior strategists look behind and beyond to the support system. The enemy's center of gravity is where an injury will hurt him most, his point of greatest vulnerability. Hitting him there is the best way to end a conflict definitively and economically. The key is analyzing the enemy force to determine its centers of gravity. In looking for those centers, it is crucial not to be misled by the intimidating or dazzling exterior, mistaking the outward appearance for what sets it in motion. You will probably have to take several steps, one by one, to uncover this ultimate power source, peeling away layer after layer. Remember Scipio, who saw first that Hannibal depended on Spain, then that Spain depended on Carthage, then that Carthage depended on its material prosperity, which itself had particular sources. Strike at Carthage's prosperity, as Scipio eventually did, and the whole thing would fall apart. To find a group's center of gravity, you must understand its structure and the culture within which it operates. If your enemies are individuals, you must fathom their psychology, what makes them tick, the structure of their thinking and priorities. In crafting a strategy to defeat the United States in the Vietnam War, General Vo Nguyen Giap determined that the real center of gravity in the American democracy was the political support of its citizens. Given that support, the kind of support the military had had during World War II, the country could prosecute a war with the utmost effectiveness. Without that support, though, the effort was doomed. Through the Tet Offensive of 1968, Giap was able to undermine the American public's support for the war. He had gained an understanding of American culture that allowed him to aim at the right target. The more centralized the enemy, the more devastating becomes a blow at its leader or governing body. Hernán Cortés was able to conquer Mexico with a handful of soldiers by capturing Moctezuma, the Aztec emperor. Moctezuma was the center around which everything revolved. Without him, Aztec culture quickly collapsed. When Napoleon invaded Russia in 1812, he assumed that by taking Moscow, the capital, he could force the Russians to surrender. But the true center of gravity in this authoritarian nation was the Tsar, who was determined to continue the war. The loss of Moscow only steeled his resolve.
And that was part of Chapter 16, Hit Them Where It Hurts, from the 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene. Back in a minute. Thank you. If you are a Democrat, you should be voting Republican because the Republican Party is the true party of civil rights. It always has been. It was the party of civil rights in the Civil War, and right after the Civil War, it is the party that came up with the first three civil rights bills, all that were killed by Democrats, by the way. So it's the Republican Party that has always been about civil rights. So if you as a Democrat are interested in civil rights, You need to vote Republican and become a Republican. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the next chapter in World War II Heroes, Medal of Honor recipients in World War II and their heroic stories.
Chapter 3. Sergeant Henry Eugene Irwin. Henry Red Irwin. He was awarded the Medal of Honor in 1945. He endured 41 operations in 30 months from the wounds he suffered in receiving the medal. He died in 2002. Henry Irwin was tough. Growing up in small-town Alabama, Henry Irwin joined the Army in 1942 as an aviation cadet in the Army Air Corps. Unfortunately, Henry washed out as a pilot, but was able and bright enough to continue training with the Air Corps as a radio operator and radio mechanic. Graduating from his training program in 1944, Henry was assigned to the 52nd Bombardment Squadron, 29th Bombardment Group, 20th Air Force of the Air Corps. This was a unit that was assigned to fly the ultra-modern B-29 Super Fortress, the largest and most advanced heavy bomber of World War II. In June of 1944, B-29s were bombing Japan from their bases in China, but this was highly dangerous as much of the coast of China was under Japanese control, and the air bases from which the Super Fortresses flew were far inland. Additionally, once they were over the coast, the planes had to fly hundreds of miles over oceans still controlled by the Japanese. One of the goals of the island-hopping campaign of the Americans in the Pacific was to establish bases from which Japan could be more easily and safely bombed. The resulting battles, namely those on Saipan in June of 1944 and Iwo Jima in February 1945, were costly, but became effective staging and recovery areas for B-29s on their way to and from bombing Japan. By April of 1945, Henry Irwin had flown 11 combat missions over Japan. By that point in the war, the Japanese Air Force was limited in its capacity to defend the home islands. Additionally, the B-29 Super Fortress was a tough plane and more than capable of defending itself. Cousin to the amazingly rugged B-17 Flying Fortress and made by the same company, Boeing, the Super Fortress came into its own over Japan. The B-29 carried a crew of 11 men in a 99-foot gleaming silver fuselage. The plane's wingspan was longer than its length at 141 feet. 12 .50 caliber guns protected the bomber. Aiding the bomber was its speed, 357 miles per hour, and its ceiling of 32,000 feet, which helped keep it safe from enemy fighters and anti-aircraft fire when it flew at altitude. Most significant was its payload of bombs, 20,000 pounds. At the beginning of the bombing campaign against Japan, the B-29s flew at an altitude to drop their payloads. But this proved very inaccurate for a variety of reasons, mostly weather and wind. When General Curtis LeMay took over the bombing campaign in the Pacific, he changed the tactics of the B-29 raids over Japan. Instead of flying at their maximum altitude, massive streams of super fortresses would fly at 5,000 to 9,000 feet and drop tons of incendiary bombs on Japanese cities. Other targets would be hit with a combination of incendiaries and explosive weapons. The most devastating bombing raid of the entire war, including the 2 atomic raids of August 1945, took place on the night of March 9th and 10th, 1945, over Tokyo, the Japanese capital, which, like all Japanese cities at the time, contained predominantly wooden buildings and went up in flames which killed an estimated 100,000 people. 16 square miles of the city were burned to the ground, and over 250,000 buildings were destroyed. This was the real beginning of a bombing campaign that was to effectively reduce close to 50% of each major Japanese city to cinders and ashes. Some cities were almost 100% destroyed. These were the types of raids that Henry Irwin had participated in by the time of his Medal of Honor winning action on April 12, 1945. By this time, Irwin had already been cited for his service twice, winning the Air Medal 2 times. On April 12th, Irwin was aboard the lead B-29 named City of Los Angeles on a raid against a chemical plant in the Japanese city of Koriyama, just over 100 miles north of Tokyo. Sergeant Irwin, like most of the crewmen aboard a B-29, had a primary job and a secondary. His primary was to man the radios and repair them should they become damaged. His secondary role was also crucial. Irwin was to drop white phosphorus smoke bombs down a chute through the bottom of the plane, which would explode some feet below and signal all of the planes in his wing to drop their bombs. These smoke bombs weighed about 15 pounds and were activated by a pin that was pulled by hand. Just off the coast of Japan on the approach to their target, Irwin's B-29 was under fire from both Japanese fighters and anti-aircraft guns on the ground when he was given the word to signal the planes of his wing. This he did, dropping a number of phosphorus smoke bombs down the chute when one malfunctioned. Phosphorus burns underwater. Phosphorus will continue to burn until it is starved of oxygen. It will burn through just about anything. In World War II and since, large phosphorus bombs and artillery shells have been used to reach enemy positions that cannot be attacked by conventional weapons or to force the enemy into the open. During World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, white phosphorus grenades were carried by infantrymen. Many times since World War II, there have been attempts to outlaw the use of phosphorus weapons, which also terrify those they are being used against. The bombs Sergeant Irwin was dropping on April 12th were signaling devices, not weapons, but they could be dangerous nonetheless. He placed a phosphorus bomb canister into the chute, and it exploded prematurely and blew back into the fuselage. When it did, it struck Sergeant Irwin in the face. The phosphorus contained inside burned at 1100 degrees. It immediately burned off one of Irwin's ears and destroyed his nose. He was also blinded. Smoke also filled the rest of the aircraft, blinding the crew, including the pilot and co-pilot, who could not even see their instrument panel to continue to fly the plane. Many people in Henry Irwin's situation might have just given up or writhed on the floor in agony, for agony was what Sergeant Irwin was experiencing. However, Irwin did not give up. He had the presence of mind to realize that the burning bomb could very well burn through the main fuselage and into the bomb bay, setting off the many tons of bombs the plane was carrying and perhaps even endangering the planes behind it. That being the case, Sergeant Irwin picked up the burning bomb. He began to burn. His face and arms were covered with burning phosphorus. The chute that the bomb normally would go down was destroyed, and anyway went past the other bombs below it, so placing the burning bomb there was out of the question. Realizing that he had only one option, Irwin headed toward the cockpit and immediately ran against an obstacle. The map table of the navigator, which was hinged to the side of the fuselage and released down into the main aisle. The navigator was in the rear of the plane performing his secondary duties, so it was left to Irwin to unlock the table and proceed to the front of the plane. This he could not do with one hand. He needed both. Taking the burning bomblet between his right arm and rib cage, he began to unlock the navigator's table. In those few seconds, the bomb burned through both the skin on the inside of Irwin's arm and his torso to his rib cage. Stumbling into the cockpit, he screamed for the pilot and co-pilot to open a window and get out of the way. He then threw the bomblet through the open window. He then collapsed between the seats in the cockpit, his body burning with the chemical that was still sticking and burning through his flesh. When the smoke cleared through the open window, Irwin's pilot, Captain George Cimarral, had only just enough time left to level the plane out at 300 feet and fly to Iwo Jima, which was now designated an emergency landing field for damaged aircraft returning from Japan, or those carrying wounded men. The lives of the men on these planes were owed to those men who had sacrificed themselves in the Iwo Jima battle just a few months before. While still in the air, Irwin's crewmates had extinguished his burning clothes, but whenever the phosphorus embedded in his body would be exposed to air, it would continue to smolder and burn again. Most amazingly, Red Irwin never lost consciousness. He asked over and over about the safety of his plane and his fellow crewmen. When they arrived at Iwo Jima, none of the medical personnel there believed that Irwin would survive. Notified of Irwin's gallantry, General LeMay and the other staff officers, whose signatures were needed to approve the awarding of the Medal of Honor, a process which usually includes investigation of the event and much time, rushed to approve Irwin for the highest award for bravery that the United States can bestow. This they did so the citation could be given to Irwin while he still lived. Having been further evacuated to the American island of Guam, Irwin not only received the medal the next day, but defied all of the odds and survived. Mentioned at the beginning of this chapter are all of the surgeries, plastic and otherwise, that Sergeant Irwin endured. He regained his sight and the use of one arm. After the war, Henry Irwin went to work at the Veterans Administration, helping vets understand the benefits that they were due them for their service. In 1951, his story was included in a movie, The Wild Blue Yonder. Finally, the Air Force named an award after him, given to enlisted personnel who excel at their duties as aircrew. Henry Red Irwin died in 2002.
And that was World War II heroes, Medal of Honor recipients, and their heroic stories of bravery. Back in a minute. Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there and reminding you that you are not neutral and that the government has no rights.